I'm Kira Cleveland, and this is Human Intelligence. With my co-host, Ned Hayes, we talk about the importance of human creativity in the age of AI. Welcome to the future.
Human Intelligence is excited to welcome Emily Harris to the show today. She's an award-winning journalist with incredible experience at the local level, national level, and also internationally. She is currently working to reinvent local journalism as a co-founder of the community journalism project Uplift Local. She does have that incredible background as a correspondent for NPR in Berlin, Baghdad, and Jerusalem. She's worked as an investigative reporter. She's worked for Portland Axios, and she's worked for Oregon Public Broadcasting, helping to create the Think Out Loud show. So she's well known in the journalism world, and we're excited to hear more about her new project.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Emily, you have done broadcast work, you've done written journalism, you've also done video work before. Here you are in video with us today. So, what led you to doing Uplift Local now?
Well, during the pandemic, as so many stories start, right? I was working for a national show. I was based in Portland, which is my hometown. But the show was based out of California, and it's national. It was run out of the Center for Investigative Reporting. It's called Reveal. It's an hour-long public radio show. And I mean, it's a great show. I loved working on it. Great people. But I was always focused on national stuff. And there was so much stuff going on in Portland during those years that I felt disconnected from. And I had always felt like being a journalist, just truly wonderful way to experience your community because, you're always learning things. And not only are you learning things, you are checking them and getting them accurate, and then you're sharing them with your community. And so I really always loved having my work be this lens to connect me to where I lived. And, whether that is Portland or whether that was Jerusalem, it was like I was focused on what is going on right around me. And when I was living in Portland and working for this national show, Reveal, that was missing. And it was fine before the pandemic when we could travel more and just had more opportunity to, really understand the communities that I was reporting on from other places. But the disconnect just really hit me strongly during that time. And I decided to start looking for ways that I could get back to local journalism. And there's a little bit of a journey there, but wound up at Uplift Local, wound up, helping create this.
Well, and you were instrumental in creating Think Out Loud on OPB, Oregon Public Broadcasting here, which is also very locally focused, right?
Yes. I mean, the OPB had dreamt up the concept before I got there, and then I was hired as the original host. And so there was a team of us that worked to get it on the air and shape that voice and stuff like that. And it's evolved, over the time period. And that was an interesting because this is a straddle that OPB has to do all the time. They're statewide, but they want to provide very local information. So, that's a tension they're playing with all the time.
Yeah. So I'll just ask an obvious leading question, but why does it matter if we are connected locally to other human beings that we're living beside?
Well, when you look at it through a lens of news and journalism, particularly decisions that are made locally do have a direct impact on you, and you have more of an opportunity to influence them. It's really difficult to actually, say, hey, I want my tax dollars, my federal income tax dollars to go, more toward this and less toward this. It's super indirect. But when you are looking at a city council or a county commission, it's still can be quite big and quite abstract, but it's more direct. So you have a chance to know what's going on better because you are seeing the impacts and the effects of decisions that are made locally. And you do have a better chance to influence what's happening because you have a better direct connection to, the people who are elected, the meetings that are going on. And, the more smaller community you get to, the more that's true.
Right. It's much more straightforward to be able to influence the opening of a local park down the street that the whole community has supported versus trying to influence something said in the State of the Union, for example.
That's a great example. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, so you've always tried to keep your feet on the ground with your local communities, and you've been all over the world. So, how do these communities differ, or what do they have in common?
Oh, well, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I think that any community, is people are trying to just manage their lives and live the best they
Mhm.
can in the circumstances that they're in. And I've lived in a whole lot of like in communities that are going through a whole lot of different situations, right? I mean, I was living in the Soviet Union when it was falling apart and watching people wrestle with what does that mean? A lot of uncertainty, just incredible amounts of change. I've spent extended periods of time in communities that are like undergoing like active, conflict and war situations and watching people try to make sense of what's going on and keep their own lives together. And I mean, even in less dire situations, like in the Columbia River Gorge in communities like Hood River or Stevenson, where we're working right now, people are doing the same thing, right? They're trying to like, okay, how do I live the best life I can in the circumstances that I have? And, how can I change it if it needs changing? So there's that kind
Yeah.
of common thread, I guess I would say, among any group of humans.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go even deeper into the weeds here, which is there's now a debate about if we are moving back into an oral culture.
Mm,
Back thousands of years ago, we were an oral culture with Homer, with poems that were spoken, not read. And then we moved into a literary culture where people put things in books. And now, with the advent of YouTube and social media and short form things, there's been a debate, I think, that Atlantic recently covered that we are moving back into kind of an oral and video way of presenting information and absorbing information. And I'm asking you this because you've been a radio journalist. So do you welcome this change back to the oral world, or do you think that this is mistaken?
oh, it's so interesting. I do think this about this a lot in the very, very mundane context of I need to know how to do something and how can I learn how to do that the fastest? And I am not personally a good learner from YouTube videos because I usually have like one really specific question and I've got to get to like, sit through, I don't know, some explanation and like, references to my, friend's birthday party and whatever it is to get to like my one question. And maybe I don't even get there because the video hasn't actually answered that, but the search, or the AI hasn't
Right.
digested it correctly. So I really prefer like written directions for stuff like that. However, I also remember 20 years ago when I have one child and she was born about 20 years ago. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not super fluent in video, but she needs to be. I've got to like figure out some way to, help her understand like the trajectory of images as a way to communicate because it's just such a potent form of communication now. And without it, she'll be lost. It turns out I didn't really have to do that for her because she grew
Because the world caught up with you, right?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
But I don't, I think that, I mean, the magic of video, and I've mostly worked in video as like, like more high end television, right? The magic of it is it when words and pictures and audio all line up together, they are incredibly powerful. And I'm not even talking about movies where you've got like music to go along with it, right? I'm just talking about communicating like as a journalist. Audio can be incredibly powerful if you use it well. We use the word intimate all the time, but really, if somebody's like saying something in your ear, I have voices in my head from working as an audio
Right.
journalist that I just can't get out of my head. It's people's intonations. It's how they stretched out the S at the end of the word. It communicates so much that isn't communicated through writing. However, writing just vast troves of information can be communicated so quickly, so effectively. And in all these forms of communication, it's difficult to communicate accurately. It is just freaking difficult to
Right.
communicate accurately with another human being. We go back and forth, we misunderstand. I mean, everybody knows that happens in text or with emojis, but it happens in long articles, it happens in books, it happens in movies,
Right.
right?
People miss the point or misconstrue the point or get off on a tangent.
Or
And
they
it's
come up with
quick.
some idea about
Yeah.
it that actually wasn't the original intent, but is also, super legitimate and takes something off into a new direction. So I don't know that we're going, more toward an oral tradition sort of permanently, but certainly it does look like kind of comfort level and skills are, ramping up in video communication and spoken communication, like to the camera, more than necessarily writing. I don't know that that's a bad thing. I do think that
It's a
more
change.
information can be communicated through writing quickly, but it doesn't mean that that is the best way to communicate what needs to be communicated or what people really want to know.
Well, you said something really interesting in there with your discussion of radio voices and voices that you've heard in your head and the kind of human pause and the moments that people change what they're saying or take a breath. And right now, we're seeing audio being narrated by AI voices. And you can hear this all the time if you listen to the radio or you listen to podcast, it will say this is brought to you by an AI voice. And over human intelligence, we are kind of defending the bright line between humans and machines. And so, is there anything lost when we start having audio come only from machines or when we have information through an AI model?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about so many AI questions as the director
Yeah.
for community journalism at Uplift Local, where we're trying to get people involved in like the civic process and help them like feel like they can contribute and participate both in like, understanding how local decisions are made and impact you, and then also participate as a conveyor of accurate information within their community. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, as far as voices go, I think that there's roles that can be filled by fake people.
Hmm.
But I think that the risk is when people start getting confused about what's a fake person and what's a real person. And I don't know that the AI generated voices will not sometime be able to fully run the range that a human oral communication can. But what we do know is that it won't be capturing a human's thinking or reflection or anything. So,
Right. So, just a small example, and I'll throw this out there. You can tell me if I'm wrong or right. But I started my writing career as a cub reporter at a newspaper. And as an early reporter there, or early in your career, you pick up the police blotter, you pick up the obituaries, you write these things down. And writing the stats of how many people were arrested for what crimes is one thing, but understanding that having a 14-year-old arrested is fundamentally different than having a 49-year-old arrested, and understanding that there's some human tragedy in there for both people, but it's different when somebody's 14 or that somebody died and they are a certain age, either they were 110 or they were 2. Both of those are different types of reactions, and I don't know if AI is it has not proved itself capable of understanding that there's a deeper context, an emotional context to raw information.
oh, that's interesting. I just read a fascinating story in the New York Times about a robot that was helping keep an elderly person company. And it was trained on sort of reading the emotional tone of the room. And I don't know really how they did that. And I don't know what the voice sounded like, but it did seem like there was some improvement to this person's quality of life by having this kind of
Yeah.
companion. And I was struck by that because I've been involved in caregiving for an elderly friend who doesn't have a lot of resources. And I don't have the kind of resources of time that she needs. And I thought, gosh, would this help her? But I think there's just so many lines to be drawn because, like, I sure wouldn't want like a kid to grow up, with the robot friend because there wasn't anybody else around to teach them how to
Yeah.
interact with humans. And I think that's the tricky part is humans are trickier than
Hmm.
AI generated voices. And so if you come to have a great deal of experience with the latter, how are you going to function with the former? And those are
Yeah.
where I think the really important questions are of what does it mean to exist in as a human with other humans? What does it mean to have an AI generated level that feels or is trying to feel human on top of it? And
Hmm.
there's just so many questions about whether that's worth it. I personally like when I get the AI, thing on the phone when I've called like a service call or whatever, I'm like, could you just, I don't want you to pretend to be Heidi. Can you just be a robot?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
know
Just
who I'm talking to.
right. My first prompt, if I ever need to use a chatbot, is to tell the chatbot not to describe itself with first person pronouns,
Oh,
but instead
interesting.
describe itself as the machine. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't run the risk of anthropomorphizing. And I keep in mind this is not Heidi. This is a machine. It's calling itself the machine recommends or the machine tells you because I think it's a slippery slope. If we start attributing things that are not real, the qualities of human. So this does circle back to journalism. And I know your former employer, Axios, now has a big partnership to use AI especially in local news. And not that I'm asking you to critique Axios, lots of people are using AI in different ways, but what are the upsides and downsides of using AI in different ways? And I'm saying using AI because it's such a broad field. I'm letting you define the terms as you might, as you may.
I haven't, that's a great question. I have not followed Axios's,
Mhm.
developments really at all since I left the company a couple of years ago. I really enjoyed working for them. And the thing I really liked about Axios was the second thing you always had to say in a story was literally why this matters. And I thought that that was really a brilliant intervention into journalism and super necessary in, connecting the information to people's lives. So I've
Yeah,
tried to like bear that in mind going forward. But I don't have any idea how they're using AI. I really haven't paid attention to it. But I will tell you how I'm wrestling with it at Uplift Local. So we run a local news service. We're serving 4 counties in the Columbia River Gorge: Klickitat, Skamania, Hood River, and Wasco, 2 on the Washington side of the gorge and 2 on the Oregon side. We're there because of a lot of research that Uplift Local did to try to figure out who and where is being most impacted by the loss or the lack of local news. But kind of
mhm,
the backbone of our program is a program called Documenters, where we train
mhm,
people, local residents, to go to local public meetings and take notes. And then they also record them. We have editors that fact check the notes against the recording and put those out with their own observations through the lens of a community member, some sort of headline summaries. That's all available for anyone to see or use. We also collaborate with other existing local news organizations. And then we take story ideas and leads and questions that come out of those to, do further research and add sort of journalism on top of that. But note taking is a really, it's a skill. It can be hard. Public
yeah,
meetings can be hard because sometimes they're complicated and people talk like inside baseball kind of things. They've been dealing with the irrigation district for years, but you're just walking in as somebody who's like living in the irrigation district area, but doesn't really know how it works. Or they're trying to build a giant bridge, a new bridge between Hood River and White Salmon. And oh my gosh, there's so many federal and state agencies involved in that. So things can be complicated. And, taking notes and summarizing, that can be complicated. There's grunt work in it. So one thing we are really trying to examine is what's the right line of using AI tools. And generally speaking, this would be a transcript, a summary from AI. And what's the place we really want to tap into the humans? How can we save people time and yet help them know that their contribution is invaluable? And that's something we are grappling with that as on a national level, because this Documenters program is part of a national network, and we're grappling with this on a local level, a very individual level. Some people are really great at taking notes, actually, and some
mhm,
people really, could use some support. And if that, maybe that support should come from some technology that's AI driven. So we're really, kind of in the thick of trying to wrestle through that. And then plus, there's commercial ventures that are scraping public meeting videos and trying to sell their services as summaries of what happened at meetings. So it's sort of a commercial venture that doesn't have the civic and community engagement piece that the program that we're building does, because ultimately our focus is getting people to feel involved in their communities and feel
Right.
involved in like providing information, accurate information to their communities, which
Right.
is
And
the
if you
whole
just have
goal.
a chat bot take some notes, that person is not involved.
It's
Now,
not involved.
yeah, so if they're actually showing up, they're being physically present, they're trying to understand, and even if they get some help to try to understand it, they are actually participating in the life of the community.
Yeah. So what's that experience versus reading the summary of a
Mhm.
meeting, and
Yeah.
there's different roles that those different things play. One thing that struck me with AI, I took a kind of a training on how to use AI effectively as a journalist a little while ago.
Mhm.
And one of the things that struck me was, first of all, how incredibly useful it would be to have somebody like, some machine analyze a bunch of things and put them together, especially like, complex laws, right? That
Yeah.
just take a long time to read. But the other thing I took out of this training was I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like they're doing all the fun stuff. Like, one of the things I love the most as a person is coming up with an idea. And most of the time, the ideas I come up with are not like purely original, right? I mean, somebody else probably thought of it before. But when my brain goes, oh, wow, I love that. I just love
Yeah.
that. And when I was in this training, I was like, oh, they're kind of setting it up like the machine gets to do the oh wows, or like, when you ask like what are some things I should be looking into, or what's a good lead for a story. I mean, you can go, oh wow, that's good, I wouldn't have thought of that. But I liked the first part where I'm like, oh, I put these dots together. I don't know, to me that's a super fun part of being human, and I was like,
Yeah.
huh, I want to keep the fun part. But maybe have somebody else like, if I can trust it's reading it accurately, tell me what the law
Mhm.
actually says, because that can be hard to follow without an expert advice. And sometimes it can be hard to reach that specific expert that knows exactly what that law is all about. But for me as a journalist, like the bottom line, like the critical line is accuracy. And that's like you can't mess with that. So I'd rather, talk to a bunch of experts on interpreting a law than like letting a machine do it until like I'm really confident that machine is going to get it right. Or, the other big piece about that is just transparency, right? I mean, this was generated through a machine analysis. This was generated from, talking to five like legal experts who've argued in front of the Supreme Court or whatever. I mean, that piece for journalism, sourcing and transparency is just kind of bedrock. And I don't,
Yeah.
that's where, how you incorporate, a machine's analysis into that. I'm not totally sure yet.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned trust in there as being incredibly important, but many of the things that are produced by generative AI today, I simply can't trust. It's deep faked, it's hallucinated, it's interpolating sources and data that weren't there. So, do you have any concerns there?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, that's why sourcing is super important so that people, like, even if you're
Yeah,
sourcing a human, right? You can, somebody listening to your story or reading your article can make their own minds of whether they trust this as a source. So
yeah.
revealing where you got your information is kind of a critical practice in journalism. But yeah, I mean, like if you can't be sure of something, you sure don't want to be spreading that around.
Right. So, do you have any thoughts about how to prevent those deleterious effects from generative AI?
Oh, I mean, I don't really know how they do it or how they train, to do that. That's like,
Yeah,
I mean, in a technical realm that I have not tried to become an expert in at all. I mean, I go back, I guess, to sourcing, one of my favorite questions for anybody, anytime is it does not make me very popular with my friends or family, but I try to say it nicely, which is like, oh, how do you know that? Where'd you find that out?
yeah,
And, and there's like, just for me in evaluating like how I, you know, where in my file slots in my brain do I put whatever information is being shared? Whatever answer they offer affects that. So if I say, oh, where'd you hear that? And they're like, ah, social media, goes in one slot. If they say, oh, I was talking to my doctor about this and they mentioned, three studies or whatever, that goes in a different slot. or if they say, I read it in a novel. I mean, they just like, I'm always interested in like how people know what they know. And there's tons of different
Right.
valid ways to get information, but I sort them out differently. And I think that that's why sourcing is so important. And with a lot of information or images or stuff that's generated by, all this like compilation and sorting through that the large language models do. Yeah, it's you got to put it in that slot of maybe. Like maybe
Oh,
that's true.
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's so interesting, this new age of information we're entering into, because half or more of the information may be generated by a system that isn't actually human. So we don't know what the ground truth is underneath it.
Yeah, and I mean humans of course make mistakes too, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I've read like just in the work we're doing at Uplift Local, I have looked at summaries from a meeting notes that a human has put together. And sometimes they get stuff a little bit wrong. I have looked
Yes.
at summaries that like AI will do after it's transcribed. We do use auto transcriptions as a
Hmm.
tool because it's way faster for an editor to verify what, like, if they're listening back to a section of a meeting notes just to fact check what a documenter, one of the people that we hire to do this, do. It's a lot faster to skim or search a transcript that you can click on the word and then listen to it than it is like running a tape back and forth with like an audio file back and forth with no words. So that marrying of transcripted, even if it's a terrible transcript and you have to like search a bunch of different terms to actually find the section you want, but that
Yeah.
marrying of words in a transcript with sound connected to them was actually revolutionary in my audio journalism career. It made an incredible difference in the amount of time it took me to work just to purely get my job done. So we use that as a tool. But anyway, I have looked at the summaries of what the otter transcript comes up with as like the key points or whatever. And there are times I don't do this on a regular basis. I'm not trying to check it because we don't use it for that, but just kind of spot looking at it. It comes up with stuff. It gets stuff confused. It has gotten stuff confused. So that's where we don't want to trust that, at least at this point. But humans can get stuff wrong too. What
Yeah.
which is why there's that editing layer in what we're doing. But there's also this section that's super important for us, which is questions and observations in this note taking section, where the person who's been at the meeting, says what they think or what they're wondering. And that is so interesting because it ranges from, you know, I'm really impressed with how these volunteers are handling my tax dollars to I have no idea what these people are talking about, to some really good
Yeah.
questions about, if you're thinking of expanding the bus system, why not consider X? So that's like information and questions from the perspective of somebody who actually lives in and exists in that community and is going to be impacted by decisions that people are making. And that's a critical part in, developing a network of people who are well informed about what's going on in their community and can share that information either through the notes, as I was talking about, or through the journalism that we build on the back of it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, one of the solutions that we have that you've actually partaken of is verifying that a person is actually a person and that they take responsibility for their work as being fully human or made by human beings. We think this is an important step because, as you said, there's already becoming some confusion about, am I talking to a person? Is this a person? Is this work created by a person? So it's odd that we're in the stage of having to verify that somebody is a person, but you did it. It wasn't that painful.
Right. And I think that what's interesting in the process that you're looking at, and something that is actually being discussed widely in the journalism industry, is where do you draw the lines? Like if you use a machine to read a text and come up with some suggestions for
Mhm.
headlines, how do you communicate that to your audience? And does the
Yeah,
audience really care about that? Like what are the pieces that are important for people who are looking to know what's going on and trust that they're getting accurate information? What are the pieces? When is something a tool and when is something,
actually
potentially.
changing the information you receive in important ways.
Yeah, and so how do you disclose those different things? That's one of the that's I mean, that's a big question in journalism. right now. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So I take it you don't have all the answers to this quandary?
No, and some days it's really like exciting to think about, and some days it's really just overwhelming to think about because it's so unclear where this is going, and it's so unclear whether people actually share a desire, like they what where do we want it to go? There doesn't seem to be consensus about that. It seems like this
Mhm.
is a really big, like, you know, technical revolution, money making, opportunity. And the conversation about where, how we want this, what roles we want this tool to play in our lives. It's a very hard conversation to have. There's too many unknowns. There's a lot of competing kind of interests. There's different groups with different amounts of power in this conversation. And so some days it's a very, interesting thing to wrestle with, and some days it's a kind of overwhelming challenge. So no, I I don't pretend to have all the answers at all. I'm just trying to figure out what are the answers, for my group of documenters and local journalists. What are the answers for us and the communities that we're serving? That's really where I'm mostly focused.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does it mean locally, right? That's where you're focused.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that we've run into with journalism too is that, some of these models are kind of rapaciously reusing journalism and are leading to the further decimation of journalistic enterprises by just taking information and basically reselling it through a chatbot. And so we're also trying to create a tool set that can protect information from being ingested without permission, without attribution, without compensation. So I'm kind of laying out that thesis for you. Do you think that's a valid place for us to go? Do you think that's a concern that journalists are facing?
Oh yeah, that's a definite concern that the whole industry is facing, and it's not just AI though that has caused that problem, right? I mean, just the commodification of news, because when the advertising sponsorships went away because they all went to digital, and not just digital, like, a digital version of a local newspaper, but to social media sites, to Craigslist, right? When that money left, then, you know, creators of news had to follow to where, like, the people were going. And so, people experimented with a lots of things, giving away their articles, putting up paywalls, all kinds of things. So this whole, like, undermining of the value of accurate, sourced
Yeah.
news has been going on for a couple of decades now. And so AI has definitely made it worse by taking everything and, using people's words and people's work. And it's not just journalists, and just using it and training, their models on it as if it's free, as if nobody put any sweat or blood or dollars into this work. That is terrible. And it really, I mean, if you look at, like, a system that we function in where supposedly you're supposed to get, like, a fair value for the product that you produce, not happening. So it's a
Mhm.
really big problem. And so if there's a way to solve that problem in a way that works for the people, who ultimately we are serving, which are the people who want to have accurate information about stuff that's going on that impacts their lives, which is essentially what journalism aims to be, then, that I think could be really important. And it's something, I mean, it's something that's been going on for a very long time. And, I think of how I don't know how many people really know what journalists do day to day. Like, you might have a better idea, like what your doctor does or what your grocer does,
Yeah.
what the police officer does, like all these people. And we all probably have wrong ideas about those things too, but it's kind of visual. It's kind of, you can kind of see it. So, you know, I wonder if how much people value having somebody who's basically, like, sitting around making phone calls, talking to people, checking things out, reading reports, analyzing data. Like, that's what they're doing all day. And that's is that a role that we want to make sure is in every community? Is that a role that we want to be able to fund in every community and keep that there? So I think, when I think about sort of proving humanness or whatever, or protecting human work, I think that's a really important question too. Like, do you want this role as a vital piece of your community, along with the grocer, the police officer, the firefighter, the doctor? And I hope that people will understand that role and say yes to it more and more.
Wow, that is so important. Thank you for sharing that with us, Emily.
Oh, sure.
And thank you for your perspective. Really appreciate it.
It's great to talk to you. Good luck with everything you're doing.
You can find out more about any of these news items and hear the complete interview on the extended premium version of our podcast at humanintelligence.news. Today's episode was produced by Ned Hayes and engineered by Muhammad Adnan. Our analog-only human-themed music was created for the Human Intelligence podcast by Josh Pinkston of Nature and Spirit. This episode, and every episode, is brought to you by the Human Intelligence Institute team. Thanks for listening to today's episode. As always, this episode is available online at humanintelligence.news.